Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar series. My name is Katie Lentini. I'm the Director of Channels here at FutureCom. I want to thank everyone for joining today's presentation, hosted by FutureCom and SolarWinds. At this time, I will pass things over to Justin Powell, FutureCom Senior Sales Engineer, to speak briefly about our services capabilities. Justin, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Katie. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. As Katie said, I'm Justin Powell, Senior Pre-Sales Engineer here at FutureCom. I do want to take a second for those who are new to introduce a little bit about FutureCom in case you don't know. We were established in 1991, so we've been around in this space for quite a long time. We're headquartered in Grapevine, Texas, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, just actually by the airport. And we focus on what we call the 3 C's: it's cybersecurity, consulting, and cloud. And if you've worked with us or taken a meeting with us, you've seen this diagram before. Normally it's printed out, and I call it our cheat sheet because it's the equivalent of our sales presentation, because what this diagram shows are the various areas where we provide products, services, solutions. And I want to touch on something I don't think I've really touched on it that much in other webinars. I don't use the term reseller. It's not a term that's in my vocabulary because I don't think there's a lot of value to reselling things. When I talk about what we do, I talk about us being a solution provider. And what I mean by that is that we're not just trying to sell you a box. We're not just trying to sell you some sort of technology. What we want to do with our customers is to understand their business, understand their needs, and come up with solutions that meet those needs. And what I mean by that term solution is it's some combination of technology, services, as well as potentially consulting, maybe managed services, and I'll talk about those here in a minute. But it's the combination of those things that deliver the results that our customers are looking for. That's what we're focused on. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to do this very quickly. I think I only have four slides here. I've cut it down, so we'll keep it short. We live in a world that is increasingly complex from a technical perspective. As we started this webinar series, we were all getting used to, quote, working from home. And now I don't even think about it. It's just what I do. It's the new normal, right, in our daily lives. But from an IT perspective, I work with customers every day who are still trying to figure out, okay, how do I secure this new weird hybrid environment where all of my users are dispersed? They're on a crazy number of devices. Data can live in a data center or in the cloud or even in somebody's, PC on their desk at home. How do we deal with that from a security perspective, from a performance perspective, from a monitoring perspective? And we're consistently having those conversations with our customers because, of course, they're dealing with that complexity because we do live in that complex world. But you add to that this second idea that there's definitely a labor shortage, and I'd say in general there's an IT labor shortage, but it's especially acute in the cybersecurity side of businesses in the U.S. 62% of U.S. organizations say they're understaffed. It takes some number of months to fill cybersecurity positions, and oftentimes what we're finding is that they're either never filled or they have to be modified. The position request has to be modified to fit the available labor, right? Somebody might not have the skill set you're looking for. Maybe you have to develop that internally or work with a partner such as FutureCom to acquire that skill set. Not to be the bearer of bad news, but it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. There's a projection that there will be about 2 million people short from a cybersecurity perspective by 2022. And that number 2022 seemed way far in the future. And when I originally put this presentation together, now it seems much, much closer. So, we're not going the right direction. So ultimately what that gives us this fundamental challenge, right? There's increasing complexity, there's resource constraints, and then as with any business, there's a time imperative. You have to get things done, on an annual basis, quarterly basis, before your next report to Wall Street, whatever it is. There's definitely a time imperative. So what IT folks have to sign up for is this idea that they've got to resolve more risk, they've got to do it faster, and they've got to do it with fewer resources. Not probably the best job description in the world. There's not a ton of people that are signing up saying, hey, that sounds great. I'd love to do that. And so that's where we come in, or that's where we try to help our customers. And I'll just build that out and talk about this real quick. Because again, we're not just trying to sell you a widget. We're not trying to sell you a box. What we want to do is understand you, understand your needs, understand your business, and then knowing what we know about what we're good at, figure out, hey, are there ways that we can help you, whether it's design or architecture at a high level, or maybe it's a regulatory compliance need, best practice. And I'm not going to read all these to you, but you get the idea. This is just a very brief summary of some of the services that we offer. And so we'd love to engage with you on those. In addition, maybe you have some ongoing quote services needs where you say, hey, I don't want to manage my firewalls, or I don't want to take the time to manage endpoint security. Those are types of solutions that we can provide a fully managed service package for you. So again, guys, thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate you taking the time. And I'm going to hand it off to our feature presenter, Will Mattingly. He is the National Account Manager for SolarWinds. Will, it's all yours.
Again, as JP said, I'm Will Mattingly. I'm one of the National Account Managers over here at SolarWinds, and I have with me Chris Jeffries, who's one of our senior sales engineers. Chris has been here for a long time and is really an expert in all things SolarWinds, from monitoring to management, and what we'll focus on today is security. So let me just do a quick overview of what SolarWinds is as a whole, and then we can get into the main part of the show. So SolarWinds has been around for a little over 20 years and has over 3,200 employees globally. We have over 30 offices. I'm out of the Austin, Texas office here where we're headquartered. Most people know us for the network monitoring portion of our platform, right? We're still the #1 in network management and have been for a really long time. What people don't know is that we're also #3 in systems management and have a really large portfolio, over 55 products in IT management, as well as a growing security portfolio. We're also a leader in remote monitoring and management, and have one of the largest user communities out there for a software, right? It's called our Thwack community. So this is a really great resource for all of you out there who are currently using SolarWinds, who are thinking about using SolarWinds products in the future. This is where everyone can come together and share ideas and way to use the software in the best way possible. So we have over 320,000 customers in over 190 countries and have all but one of the Fortune 500 companies as customers. We also serve MSPs and many other organizations, as well as every branch of the DoD and many parts of the government. So quick overview from a product standpoint. I talked about network monitoring. So we have our main product, our flagship product, which is our network performance monitor. That's what everyone thinks of when they come to SolarWinds, right? Outside of that, we also do configuration management on the network side, as well as a lot of NetFlow work, and then really integrated into that is our system side, right? Where we will monitor your VMware, where we'll monitor the applications that are running on your servers. Chris is going to go into security more deep, but we also have a pretty advanced ticketing system that we acquired a couple years ago that really competes with ServiceNow. And then we also have a really good APM out there, which is called App Optics. So if you have interest in any of these, please don't hesitate to reach out to the FutureCom team. They can get a hold of me or Chris, anyone over here, and we can explore that further. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Chris so that we can really get into the security portion of this and go much deeper. Chris?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Will. And as Will and Justin both alluded to, the reason we're here today is for security. SolarWinds has a number of security products. Not everybody knows that those exist. So we want to spend some time first going through very briefly a slide deck of a couple of those products, and then we'll jump directly into a demonstration so you can get an understanding of kind of the look and feel of those products as well. Now, before I speak to the product specifically that SolarWinds offers, I like to take just a couple of minutes to discuss why security is important. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Verizon Business does a data breach investigation report every year. Comes out typically late first quarter, so late March, and it looks at the trends associated with breach, both those that were discovered or those that were acknowledged, as well as some of those that maybe didn't make the public eye. And they produce this report and show the trends and how things are progressing or moving as a threat world. One of the first things you'll notice here is this chart shows how those threats have changed over time. So it's giving us a good 5-year kind of snapshot there. Phishing, that's still one of your top threats, account takeovers. So we'll talk about our SolarWinds Identity Monitor that's going to help with monitoring for that account takeover type activity. Use of stolen credentials, same type of idea there. Who is gaining access to those credentials, and then how are they attempting to use them within your organization? And then one that really stuck out to me and is kind of surprising there is the fourth one down, misconfiguration. So if you look at where it started in 2015, it was the lowest. It was number 8 within these categories. Now it's jumped to number 4 in that list. And keep in mind, again, this was something where this research was done prior to the pandemic. So prior to everybody working from home, prior to the additional stresses that brought along. So as we go through these different products, and as Verizon continues this report for next year, I'm predicting that misconfiguration is going to continue to go up simply because of the new work from home lifestyle and the stresses that go with that we're experiencing. Now that same report did find some additional interesting findings. So one, external threats continue to outnumber those internal threats 4-to-1. The majority of those are phishing attempts. And you think about the work from home world, we're still getting those same phishing attempts. Oftentimes the content is different. Now it appears that it's coming from some type of healthcare organization or some type of pandemic related relief. So employees are more likely to click on those thinking that it is something that they should be researching and potentially exposing themselves and your organizations to from a credentials perspective. I touched on it, the misconfigurations or errors are growing. Once again, that was pre-pandemic. You think about the pandemic now, there's no longer that shoulder surfer, if you will, where your employees going in and make a change on a device, whether that be Active Directory change, device on a network configuration, and they no longer have that peer sitting in the cubicle next to them, asking them to do that peer review before they go ahead and make that change. Now it's a phone call or some type of collaboration, some type of chat message and something. And sometimes we need to get these tasks done. So oftentimes that secondary peer review may go missed. So that misconfiguration is again going to continue to grow up. And then finally, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, what size of organization, there are going to be breach attempts across all of those. Now, if you look at the list there, there are some very common ones, healthcare, financial, leading the pack, but you'll see it's something as small as trade or real estate industries are still experiencing those same breach attempts as well. So now we've kind of talked about the landscape, if you will, why that security is important. Let's talk about what SolarWinds offers and some of those products. As Will mentioned, we have over 55 products. There are 7-8 products in our security portfolio alone, plus a couple that kind of carry over from some of our network monitoring, systems monitoring into a security realm as well. And so today we're going to be focusing on the 4 that are kind of highlighted there. Our Security Event Manager, which is our SIM solution, our Access Rights Manager, who manages and audits the user rights across your environment, Identity monitor, again, monitoring the identity for your users from an account takeover perspective. Make sure they were not part of one of those breaches that takes place and may or may not make the headlines. And then finally, and kind of surprising to some people, our network configuration manager. And that's where we'll start today. Our network configuration manager is part of our network pillar. So it's part of our products that falls in lines with the network performance monitoring, bandwidth monitoring. But because of that misconfiguration and because these devices that we're monitoring or backing up with this product, the routers, the firewalls, because they are one of those lines of defense within that tiered security model, the network configuration manager falls within the security line as well. So what it's going to do is it's going to back up your configurations for you. It's going to identify changes and show those changes side by side. So if something does get missed in a peer review process or in a change management process, we'll show you what that change was. And then we'll also give you the ability to rectify those changes by uploading a previous config, changing that configuration, etc. And we'll show that in a demonstration here in just a couple of moments. And then finally, since we have those configurations, why not allow you to take it a step further and compare those against known compliance and security policies so that you can identify where there may be potential holes within that security platform. And then finally, NCM is licensed by the number of devices that are being backed up from the product itself. I mentioned our security event manager, our SIM solution. So it's that centralized log collector for the various devices. We talked about the network devices. So those network devices where the configuration's being backed up would also send their syslog data or their log data via syslog to the security event manager. It also monitor your servers and the application running on those servers. So pulling in things like application system security logs, pulling in any type of application, maybe it's antivirus application, IDS, IPS, some type of DLP solution. We're gonna collect all that various log data for you, provide it within a centralized console from not only a visibility perspective, but also to provide some event correlation, so taking action on those events. And then finally, also be able to report from those same type of compliance perspectives that the network configuration manager is going to help with. So your PCIs, your HIPAAs, your DSysDigs, etc. Just like in Network Configuration Manager, our Security Event Manager is also licensed by the number of devices. In this case, number of devices sending their log data to that Security Event Manager. Third product of the four that we're going to cover today is that Access Rights Manager. So it's going to help not only to help demonstrate compliance, help make sure that those that should have access, so making sure HR is the only group and users that have access to those HR files, that payment card industry data is not being compromised by allowing an extreme number of users to be able to access it, but also authorizes accessibility to those systems. So having the ability to make changes and delegate some of those changes to other users within the organization. And we'll go through that during the demonstration. And finally, ARM is licensed by the number of enabled accounts within Active Directory. Final one here is our identity monitor. So it's going to be that early warning system for credential exposure within data breaches. We do breach monitoring for you, so we are going to monitor for those breaches and then identify what users based on your email domain are susceptible or part of that particular breach. We'll show what type of information was obtained within that breach, and then give you some remediation suggestions on how to remediate those threats as well. Very similar to Access Rights Manager, our identity monitor is going to be licensed by the number of users or employees. All right, so I think I've done enough death by PowerPoint there. Let me actually close out of my PowerPoint here, and we'll jump directly into the products. Now, we're covering 4 products today. I know that your time is valuable, so I'll spend maybe 5-6 minutes per product just to kind of give you an idea of the look and feel of each one. Keep in mind, should you have interest in any of these or any of the other products that I briefly touched on in that earlier slide, reach out to your FutureCom account manager. We'd be more than happy to set up a more in-depth conversation with you. All right, so our first product here is our Access Rights Manager. And again, the big thing with this is, how do I know who has access to what? So a perfect example is, I want to know who has access to my marketing folder. Well, if I simply start to type in marketing here, it's going to search through all the things that the Access Rights Manager is monitoring, and it's going to show me those. So I see that I have a user that has marketing within their title. I can see some groups, but the thing that I'm focused on is this folder, this directory on my file server. So if I click on it here, it's going to take me to my resources tab, and it's going to outline those resources. And you can see we have a breakdown the file server, then we get into the organization, the various folders, till I see marketing here. Now, when I click on that folder name, I'm going to see my full account permissions over here on the lower right-hand side. Simply scrolling through, this seems like a large number of users for a marketing directory here. And just at first glance, I can notice here, I happen to know who Chad is. Chad is not somebody that I would expect to have access to marketing. So if I want to verify, I can simply right-click Chad's name here, choose to show their information within my account view. And now on the right-hand side, I'm going to see the full attributes about Chad's user account. One of the things that you will notice here is Chad's title is a boat operator. So we'll use this as an example of maybe a cruise line or cruise ship. Boat operator is not somebody who needs access to that marketing folder. So I can easily, within a couple of different ways, remove Chad's permissions. One of my preferred methods is to come back to my resources here, right-click on that folder, and choose Modify Access Rights. And the reason I show it from here is within this, it's going to give me that breakdown once again to show me who has access and what level of access they have, so that if I need to make more than one change, maybe I need to remove a number of users, I can do so from this screen. I do have the option to go through a user account perspective instead, so maybe look at Chad and then add or remove him from those resources. But if I want to remove Chad here, I can simply come in, click remove. It's going to allow me to apply that change and remove Chad from this particular permissions. Now, there are times where it's not a removal that needs to take place. So looking at my resources once again, if I need to maybe add users to my human resources, I can go through that same step, modify my access rights. Now I could come in here and I could search. Now, Chad doesn't belong in this one, but I'll use him as an example once again. I could come in, I could type in Chad's name. When I click on Chad here, it's going to add it to my list. That way, if there are multiple users, very common users have the same first name or maybe a variation last name when you're searching. So it'll pull up any users that meet that particular search criteria. And then all I have to do is come in and drag and drop that user where I want to add them. Clicking apply would allow me to save that change, and it would push out that change to that particular resource as well. So that's one common example of how the Access Rights Manager can be used to identify who has access to what, but also rectify those that access within the organization. It is also going to track all of those changes, so you will see who is making those changes when those changes are being made. And when I went through the example of using this interactively by searching for that marketing folder here at the top, you'll notice that we do have a number of reports pre-built for you. Very common ones are going to be things like who has access where, show me users that have direct access to file servers, and who has access through each of those permission groups. Now, the report does take a couple of minutes to run, so I won't run one just due to the sake of time here, but know that not only can you run these manually, but through the reports here, you can also schedule these to run so that they're running on an automated basis so that you don't have to be in front of this ARM console to see those reports and who has access to what. Continuing on here, we're going to jump into the Security Event Manager here next. Again, Security Event Manager is our SIM solution. It goes very well with the Access Rights Manager. Reason being is Access Rights Manager is looking for who has access to what, who has access to that marketing share, who has access to the files within those. The Security Event Manager is monitoring that same type of activity, so who's making those changes, who's adding Chad to a marketing group, in turn giving him that access to that marketing directory, or who's removing Chad from that group. It also has a feature called File Integrity Monitoring, where we can monitor those same files, the marketing, the human resources, etc. And we can identify who's making changes to those files, who's reading those files, writing those files. And the important thing is all of that information, all of the Active Directory group changes, all of the file integrity events, they all come into this single console for you. Now, events is where all of that data comes in. As I've been talking, you've seen some of the events scroll through here. One of the important things is we're going to make this, again, kind of the topic of today's presentation, as simple as possible for you. So ways that we do that is by normalizing this data. If I come in here and I click on an event, I apologize, it looks like my demo environment may have timed out as I'm talking here, so we'll give it just a moment to refresh. But as these events are coming in, the Security Event Manager is normalizing them for you. And what I mean by that is from a network device perspective, it doesn't matter if you have Cisco, Palo Alto, SonicWall, Dell, HP, combination of all the above. We're going to take those various events. We're going to collect that syslog data, and then we're going to put it into a human readable format so that a TCP event, like you see within here, is that same TCP event across those vendors. It also means that a user logon is treated just like a user logon. So if I come down to our filters over here on the left-hand side and click on my user logon field here, it's going to show me all those various logons. And you'll notice just from the event info here, I've got a VPN logon listed here. I've got some PAM, so some Linux or Unix authentication events. I've got some network related logons. And as I click on any one of these, I'm going to see that normalized data here on the right-hand side. And it's that normalization that not only makes it easier to read and understand, but allows me to use things like these filters over here on the left. Filters are simply picking up specific details that either SolarWinds has defined in our default filters, or that you define when you create your own filters to limit your view so that you can quickly see those events of interest. So in this particular example, it's simply looking at this user event or user logon event type. You'll notice, however, we have additional filters here for further filtering out those logons. So get rid of my network logons and only show me interactive logons. Get rid of my local authentication and only show me those remote logon attempts. So the event section here is focused on not only this real-time feed, but also your ability to come in and search. So if I'm looking for my logons from some type of elevated privilege user, I could come in and I could search for those users. Now, another important aspect with our event normalization here is the ability to then take these events from these different disparate systems and correlate them to add some context behind them and then take action on them if necessary. And that's all done through the rules section here. Now we do include a number of pre-configured rule templates for you out of the box. So if there are events that you are interested in looking at, you can come in and search, and it's going to show you those pre-configured templates. And here's what I mean by adding context behind those. By me simply typing in logon, I've got a number of different logon failure alerts listed here. This first one, continuous excessive logons. Within the rule criteria, we're identifying that it has to be continuous by adding a number and time threshold there. So 5 within 30 seconds. And we are saying that to further reduce the chances of false positives, all 5 have to come from the same user account. So that way, by the off chance that 5 people randomly mistyping their password isn't going to cause this particular rule to trigger. The next one down here, our critical account logon failure. Again, it's still looking at the same type of a logon failure event, but now we're adding the context that it has to be a elevated user account. And you can do that by creating a whitelist of those users. You can do that by integrating with Active Directory, pulling over those domain admin type of groups, and then saying anything within these groups, any user within this that fails to log in, take some type of action. And then the final example, a firewall logon. So differentiating between the various devices. So if I only want remote logon failures from maybe my servers, I have a report, or excuse me, a rule available for that within the templates further down. But I want firewall, so I could easily come in here, check the box next to that template, review the rule condition or criteria, and then click next here to get to my actual actions. And that's the final important piece with the Security Event Manager. I can come in here and I can choose to send an email notification. But if you notice, if I remove my search criteria here, there are a number of additional actions available with the Security Event Manager as well. So it is a more proactive solution for you. Not only is it going to allow you to receive that notification of events, but if you choose, you can allow it to take actions like maybe blocking an IP address at a firewall or at a router. It might be something along the lines of logging a user off or disabling their user account, something when it comes to those access attempts or that file activity monitoring that we're doing. The important thing with these actions is they are all disabled out of the box. So we are going to be a monitoring and alerting solution for you first. And then if I cancel out of this, if you do choose to take those actions, you can place the rule in what we call a test mode first. That's going to allow the rule, the Security Event Manager, to look for the criteria within that rule without actually taking the action. Instead, what it does is it notifies you, here's what I would have done. I would have emailed, and it'll list out the email recipients. I would have logged user off, and it'll list the user that it would have logged off and the machine that it would have logged them off on. So it's a great way to validate those actions, including the email message, before you actually enable them. So that way you are truly getting the notifications and taking the actions when they should happen on your network. Finally, we are going to include a dashboard with this as well. You do have the ability to come in here and customize it. And then finally, we are also going to include a reporting console out of the box. It's a separate a view, a separate application from here. So in the interest of time, I won't pull it up, but just know that it's where you are going to go to schedule your reports so that you have those daily, weekly reports running for industry or compliance requirement or for your security needs. The nice thing is you can have that reports console installed on multiple machines. So throw it on a server for the automation side of the reports, the scheduling side, and then have it on a couple of people's workstation so that should they need to, they can go in and run those reports. About 5-10 more minutes here, and then we'll open it up for question and answers. The next product here that I'll cover is that network configuration manager. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it ties directly into some of our other network and systems monitoring. So that's why you'll see some of those others listed within my dashboard here, going specifically to the network configuration manager. First thing is it is vendor agnostic. So you'll see here I have multiple vendors. As I begin to drill down, I can see each one of my different device types, and then I can see those various configs that are being backed up. You'll notice here, based on the timestamps, that we're backing this up every night. We're backing up both the startup and the running config. We provide an automated job process for you to back up these configurations. Now we've got it set up in this demo environment to back up every night, back up every config. But what we generally recommend is allow it to back up for a couple of days so that you have those configurations stored, and then adjust that backup process so that it's only backing up configuration files that have actually changed. That way you're not filling your database or your repository with the same configuration over and over again. Now, as I mentioned in the slide deck there, one of the biggest reasons that this falls within that security pillar for SolarWinds is because we have the ability to monitor for those changes and highlight those changes for you. So you'll see in this very basic example here, I've got a config. The previous config prior to the change is over on the left-hand side here. Config after the change is going to be over on the right. It's going to show me what has changed by indicating any lines that have been added in this green indicator. Any lines that were removed or not existed in the earlier config will show up in red. And then finally, any lines that were changed will show up in yellow. And here's where, again, with misconfiguration climbing prior to the pandemic this year, and my guesstimation there is it's going to continue to grow. This is where it's going to become very valuable, because not only can you see this based on that job schedule, so every night, but there's also a feature built into the network configuration manager called real-time change detection. So if it detects a change has been made, it can send this style of report in an email to you after that change has been made, so that you can quickly see, one, was it an authorized change, but two, was there that that fat finger, that misconfiguration based on there may not being that peer review that would typically take place in an office type environment. Now, a couple of other things with the network configuration manager. I had mentioned how we can also take these configurations and compare them to known security or compliance type of requirements or regulations. And that's done through what we call policies. So if we take a look at our policies here, we're going to include a number of the policies out of the box. Some of those might be vendor specific, and those would be more vendor best practices. So when you receive a new device, here's what we recommend changing from a hardening perspective. They may also be security or maybe a particular compliance related. So I can see here under PCI, I've got a number of different requirements. And if I want to review those, I simply come in here and choose View Report. It's going to show me each one of those regulations across the top, whether or not my particular device meets that regulation and what the devices are. Now, if I want to review this even further, I can click on my violation details. It's going to tell me what that violation is, and then I can choose to remediate the issue from the network configuration manager on that one device. So in this example, this Denver device, this 2600 listed here, or alternatively, I can execute a remediation script across all 54 devices. So that's going to save me a lot of time in hardening my systems or making those changes to ensure that I'm limiting those potential vulnerabilities. And you do not have to wait for one of these policies to identify a violation. Within the network configuration manager and the configuration management screen here, it is going to allow you to make those changes as well. So I could come in and I could make a single change by clicking my execute script, or I can choose to change all those simultaneously. Where this might become valuable is implementing something like that security event manager where you need to go and configure syslog on a large number of devices, you know, research, make sure that those devices do utilize the same commands. A lot of times a single vendor will have the same commands. There are a few that might switch or be different from a router switch perspective compared to their firewalls, but it would allow me to come in here, save those commands so that when I need to push them out, I could do so in bulk. Or as I spin up new devices on my network and need to enable syslog on those, I could come back in here and run that one off for those as well. Final product here, again, is the identity monitor. And again, it's all about the account takeover. So what you do is you provide your email domain or domains. We do verify it, so I can't go in and add SolarWinds myself because I'm not an administrator. There has to be some validation that can only be set up by the domain administrators within your IT organization so that they are authorized for us to use your domain within our breach searches. We'll then provide you a dashboard like you see here. It's going to show your exposure timeline, and these spikes are going to be the number of records discovered for your organization within that breach. So you'll see here I have one from just over a year ago that has over 7,000 records. Then I've got another one here more recently, and you'll notice that as I hover over this one, it only says that there are 3 records, so that doesn't explain that large spike. But you'll also notice that there were 6 breaches identified at this same time. And as I scroll through, I can see how many records per breach. And as I get here to one of the last ones, I can see this one was the big one with the 4,000 records. Now, if I want to review those, I can simply click on it here. It's going to take me to those records where I'm going to see the email that was exposed for those. I can potentially see the password. It's all going to depend on how the vendor that was breached, so whether it be the website or database, whatever it was that was breached, how they store that information. And then I can see a severity level. So the exposed password could not be cracked. So this is an informational level. But if I come back to my dashboard here and I look at some of the other examples utilizing another area of my dashboard, instead of looking at it from that breach perspective, maybe I look at it from a email perspective. Now that's going to come in, show me each of my emails. Now I can see that severity level is critical. And the reason being is that sensitive data is exposed. And I could go as far as looking at the raw data that was exposed to see what was then made available to the dark web or to whoever accessed this information. And the important part here is not only we are collecting it, not only providing it for you, but we're also collecting this data regularly. So if I go back to my dashboard here and we look at that breach catalog, you know, we're showing back many years, but if I come back in here just to the last 3 months and explode there, you'll see that there are multiple breaches per month that we are providing. Now, how often it updates within your dashboard is really going to depend on if there are users that you know, were susceptible to that particular breach. And then, as I mentioned, we'll provide recommendations. So is this something where you should instruct the employee to change their password? You'll see within our asset types, we pull other information, you know, personal information, phone numbers, financial information, credit card numbers, things like that. So maybe you take it a step further and tell them that, you know, they need to change or request a new credit card. So it really allows you to get ahead of where your users' information may be breached, so that going back to that Verizon database report, you're not part of that second tier where stolen credentials was number 2 in that list of trends from a breach attempt perspective. All right, so I think that covers everything from a demonstration perspective. So I'm going to take just a moment here to catch my breath, and we'll go ahead and turn it back over to Katie.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for doing that demo. I think that helps people to see and understand kind of the perspective on those things. That does conclude the presentation portion of today's event. So I do want to thank Justin, Will, and Chris for their time. And we're going to go ahead and swing over to the Q&A portion of our event. We'll start reading through those. If you think of anything as we go, or if any of the questions that I read sparks another question that you might have in your mind, then definitely add that to the list, and we'll just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to throw this to you guys. The very first one we have is, in regards to IDM, how does your product provide alerting around new compromises?
Sure. So as far as the identity monitor that I covered there, so we have a team of professionals that scours the dark web and have actually worked their way into some of these organizations that have access to this data. So they are constantly pulling and gathering this information and then providing it not only through the Identity Monitor dashboard, but also providing it in the form of an email letting you know that your organization may have experienced exposure from that breach and how many exposures. Now, how often you receive that notification, again, will vary. If it's a large organization where you have a large number of employees, that's simply going to increase the chances that one of those employees or multiple employees were exposed in that breach. So you may receive, you know, several emails per month. Or if you're a smaller organization with fewer users, you may receive 1 or 2 notifications per month.
Awesome, thank you. I think that helped answer that. I also have another one. Does your SIM allow any other log formats other than syslog, for example, CEF?
Great question. So yes, really it's going to boil down to how does that device send its log data? So if it's in the form of syslog, then we will collect it. If it doesn't offer syslog and it's in a CEF format, or if it's a vendor that has kind of created their own format, Checkpoint has for a number of years, we're going to collect it in whatever that native format is. And then from an operating system or server perspective, we're simply going to collect it through whatever log format it is. So event log at the EVTX format, flat file format, if they log to a database, etc. So we have a number of ways that we can read those logs.
Okay, thank you. All right, this one is, looks like probably is going to be along the same lines. Is SIM only for devices in the data center, or can endpoints be monitored too? SEM, sorry.
So our Security Event Manager does allow you to monitor endpoints as well. One of the features that I didn't cover on today's presentation is a USB Defender function that's built into that data collection technology. It's essentially an agent, and that is very beneficial at the workstation level. So in today's work from home world, where your employees are now accessing that sensitive data, or maybe trying to copy that data from a file server across a VPN back to their workstation just so they can work with it locally, that user device tracker, or excuse me, USB Defender has the ability to monitor those file access attempts on that USB device that they may be trying to copy it to from, and take it to a personal device, or you know, leaving it, taking it externally as well. So to circle back to the question, the answer is yes, you can monitor workstations also.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you. Here's another one. Where does Identity Manager get its data?
Yeah, so touched on that briefly in the earlier question there. So we have a team that is dedicated. That's their sole purpose, is to you know, find this breach information very oftentimes before it makes its way out into the headlines. So within the dashboard, there may be times where you might see it says private information, meaning that there's still an investigation going on, or that breach name cannot be exposed at that time. So that's how quickly we can get this information, is we can gather it you know, from the source, from the person or organization that performed the breach, and provide you that awareness to you're being potentially exposed.
Thank you. And it looks like we've got one last question here, unless somebody else adds another one. This one is for ARM. Can you take any type of remediation or action against accounts?
We can. So I showed it very briefly within the demonstration, with the ability to remove or add users to that file server or to that particular share. There are other remediations that you can take at the account level as well. So that might be disabling the user account. You can also automate those. So there's a task section where you can automate, maybe it's the changing of passwords, or it might be the disabling of a user after X many of days. So there are some automated remediation steps that can be taken also.
Great, thank you. And it looks, Chris, like I think we have answered all of the questions. Oh, nope, it looks like, sorry, I think we've got one more here. For NCM, does everyone have access to make device level configuration changes?
Sure, yeah. So I showed the example there where you could make the change, push out that configuration change from a syslog perspective. You can set access rights within the SolarWinds console there, so that only administrative level users have the ability to push out those changes. There's also kind of a change management process built in to the network configuration manager as well, so that if you want somebody to suggest a change without having the ability to make that change, you can include it within a change approval process.
Okay, now I think we officially have hit all of the questions. Thank you to our presenters again, to Justin from FutureCom, Will and Chris from SolarWinds for their time today and for that information, that demo. We do appreciate that. If you think of any additional questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to your account manager here at FutureCom. If you do not have an account manager currently, you can reach out to our customer care team. The information is on the page, as well as my own. You can always reach out to me. Again, thank you guys. And other than that, y'all stay safe, stay secure, and have a great evening.